The doctor said Diana had 8 weeks. She made it to 11. The bills kept coming long after she was gone. I was still writing checks to specialists when they called me into that conference room. 7 days before my $42,000 bonus was supposed to hit. My name's Garrett Wells. I'm 48 years old, and that Tuesday morning wasn't how I thought my 15 years at TechFlow Solutions would end. Maxwell Stone sat across from me with this smug look, adjusting his Apple Watch like he was timing my reaction. Guy was 36, MBA from Northwestern. All buzzwords and no real experience. Always talked about digital transformation and agile methodologies like they were magic spells. Patricia Reynolds from HR clicked her pen repeatedly. Wouldn't make eye contact. Garrett, we're restructuring the technology team, she said. Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately, just like that. 15 years gone in a 10-minute meeting. I'd just finished Project Navigator 3 weeks earlier, a $28 million payment processing system for First National Bank. Took me 8 months to build, working nights and weekends while Diana was getting chemo. Maxwell called it legacy code architecture in front of the board. Translation: old guy stuff that needs to be replaced by young guys who work for half the salary. What about severance? I asked. My voice came out flat. Never let them see you rattled. Diana always said, standard package. Patricia chirped, 2 weeks plus positive references, assuming no complications. I stood up, grabbed my coffee mug. It said world's most adequate programmer. Diana bought it after my first promotion. Walked through an office full of people suddenly fascinated by their monitors. Nobody looks at you when you're the one getting axed. These were the same people who'd celebrated when Navigator went live, who'd called me a genius when the system processed its first billion-dollar day without a glitch. My desk looked smaller than I remembered. 15 years of my life fit into one cardboard box. Photo of Diana from our anniversary dinner, back when her hair was still thick and brown. My security badge with its faded magnetic stripe. Stack of programming books that were apparently obsolete now, replaced by YouTube tutorials and boot camp graduates. The elevator ride down felt endless. Made it to my Honda Civic before the anger hit. Not the hot kind that makes you punch walls, the cold kind that sits in your chest like a stone. Diana died 6 months ago. Lung cancer, never smoked a day in her life. Hospital stays, oncologists, experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover, not medically necessary. They said about the $80,000 immunotherapy that might have given us another year. Final tally came to just under $280,000. Insurance covered maybe 60%. I'd been making minimum payments, stretching it month to month, waiting for bonus season. That $42,000 was going to make a real dent. Now I had nothing. 2 weeks severance wouldn't cover a week's worth of medical debt. At 48, in the tech industry, I might as well have been 80. Every job posting wanted digital natives and fresh perspectives, code for young and cheap. Maxwell had made that clear in the last team meeting, talking about how the company needed to embrace the energy of the next generation while looking directly at me and the other senior developers. I didn't think about the contract until Thursday night. 2 beers deep, sitting in my home office, staring at Diana's empty chair. The house felt too big without her voice filling it. That's when I remembered the filing cabinet. Not some desk drawer, the locked metal cabinet where I kept important documents. Birth certificates, insurance policies, house deed, and my original employment contract from 2009. I pulled it out, still in its TechFlow envelope from back when Lawrence Hoffman was CTO, back when they valued experience over energy drinks and ping pong tables. Unfolded it slowly, read through the legal language line by line. Page 6, Section 14C, buried under termination conditions. If employee is terminated without cause, employee shall be entitled to 8% of company net quarterly profit in the quarter of termination in lieu of standard severance. I read it 5 times. 8% of TechFlow Solutions' entire quarterly net profit, not my department's bonus pool. The whole company's profit. I sat back in my chair, leather creaking. That clause, I'd negotiated it back in 2009 when I'd built their first mobile banking platform. It was supposed to be insurance, protection against exactly this situation. A golden parachute that seemed impossible to trigger back when I thought I'd retire from this place. Maxwell never read my contract. Why would he? Guy probably thought due diligence was a new JavaScript framework. He saw an expensive senior developer and dollar signs, not realizing he was about to trigger the most expensive termination in company history. I pulled up my email and searched for Orlando Hayes. Orlando worked as our quality assurance lead, been there 10 years, good guy, thorough. the kind who actually reads documentation. Found what I needed. An email from last month where he'd accidentally copied me on internal Q3 projections. The numbers were right there. Project Navigator hitting the books this quarter. Payment processing contracts, high margins, minimal overhead. Plus the new partnership with Regional Credit Union, another $12 million in licensing fees. Projected net profit, $22,008 million. I opened the calculator on my phone. 22.8 million times 0.08's $1,824,000. I stared at that number until my vision blurred. Set down my beer because my hands needed to be steady. That wasn't just money. That was every medical bill Diana left behind, paid in full. That was the mortgage cleared, the car replaced, and enough left over to actually live again. Maxwell thought he was screwing me over. Instead, he just triggered a clause worth more than most people make in a lifetime. But here's the thing about corporate types like Maxwell. They don't fire you once and call it done. They build a case afterward. Fake performance reviews, invented complaints, anything to convert restructuring into terminated for cause, which meant I needed to move fast. I picked up my phone and texted Orlando, "Need to talk, not about work, personal matter." His response came back in 5 minutes, "Coffee tomorrow?" Starbucks on 5th, 7 a.m. I sat my phone down and looked at the contract again. Section 14C, 8 perfect percent. This wasn't about revenge. This was about accountability. This was about making sure Maxwell learned that experience isn't just something you put on LinkedIn. It's insurance. Friday morning, Orlando was already at our usual table when I walked into Starbucks. He looked nervous, kept checking his phone. "They're saying you quit voluntarily," he said before I even sat down. "Told everyone you wanted to pursue entrepreneurial opportunities. Voluntarily." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's creative." Orlando leaned forward, lowered his voice. "Listen, there's stuff you need to know. Maxwell's been bragging about how much money he's saving, called it optimizing human capital allocation. Says the new team structure will increase velocity by 40%. Velocity meaning cheap, exactly. He's planning to replace you with 3 bootcamp graduates. Total cost, $180,000 versus your $125,000 salary. Says it's about fresh thinking and digital nativity. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Who else got cut? 2 other senior developers, both over 45. Melissa Crawford from accounting. She's been asking questions about revenue recognition for Navigator. Orlando looked around the coffee shop. And here's the kicker. Maxwell's already talking about his year-end performance bonus. Said eliminating legacy overhead should put him in line for director level. So they cut me right after I delivered their biggest payday, and he gets promoted for it. That's the plan. Orlando pulled out his phone. I still have senior access to the executive shared drive. They forgot to revoke it when they passed me over for team lead last year. Been doing the work for 2 years without the title or pay. He showed me the screen. Access to folders I'd never seen. Maxwell keeps everything in there. Budget projections, personnel decisions, strategy documents. Guy thinks he's building a paper trail to justify his promotion. I looked at him, really looked at him. Orlando was 44, solid engineer, been passed over twice for promotions because he didn't have the right energy for leadership. They were coming for him next. "You sure about this? If they catch you, Garrett, I've got 2 kids and a mortgage. If Maxwell's cleaning house of everyone over 40, I'm already on the list. Might as well go down swinging." He put his phone away. "I'll get you what you need, but you better have a plan that actually works." We paid separately and left through different exits. Old habits from corporate security training that turned out to be useful for corporate warfare. 3 days later, Orlando sent me files through an encrypted email account. 8 documents pulled from Maxwell's Q3 Human Capital Optimization folder. The guy actually named it that. First document, Performance Improvement Plan with my name on it, dated August 15th. I right-clicked, checked properties, date created. October 9th, 3:22 p.m. I was fired October 6th. Second document, Written Warning for Failure to Embrace Agile Transformation, dated September 10th. Date created. October 9th, 3:28 p.m. Third document, Final Performance Review citing resistance to modernization initiatives, dated September 28th. Date created October 9th, 3:34 p.m. All fake, created in a 12-minute span, 3 days after my termination. I called Howard Mitchell immediately. Howard was an employment lawyer I'd found online, specialized in age discrimination. Former DOL attorney, 25 years experience, the kind who'd prosecuted corporations for exactly this kind of behavior. His office was downtown, fourth floor walk-up, law books stacked everywhere, document falsification. I said, forwarding the files. Metadata proves everything was created after they fired me. Howard opened the attachments on his ancient laptop, studied the properties. This is good, very good. Shows consciousness of guilt, but falsified documents are just the smoking gun. What's your real leverage? I slid my employment contract across his desk, Section 14C. 8% of quarterly net profit if terminated without cause. Howard read it twice, then whistled low. This clause is bulletproof. Standard boilerplate would never include this. You negotiated this specifically? 2009. I just built their mobile platform, had offers from 3 competitors. Used it as a retention bonus, and with quarterly profits of $22 and $8 million. I have internal projections showing Navigator alone generated $28 million in new contracts. Howard leaned back, calculator out, $1.824 million. That's not severance, Garrett. That's generational wealth. He tapped the contract. They'll fight this hard. Expect them to claim the termination was performance-based. Expect them to say age was never a factor. What about the fake documents? That's our nuclear option. Document fraud, potential obstruction, if they try to use these in legal proceedings. But smart money says they'll settle before it gets that far. The next batch of files from Orlando contained the smoking gun, an email chain between Maxwell and Patricia Reynolds dated September 20th, 2 weeks before my termination. Subject line, Q3 Cost Reduction Initiative. Maxwell had written, need to reduce senior headcount by 5 positions before quarter close. Focus on high-salary developers 45 plus. Cost savings will improve departmental metrics for annual review. Targeting 400 tons will targeting $400 Kaloche in salary reductions. Patricia's response, understood. HR will coordinate performance documentation to support business-justified terminations. Recommend staggered timing to minimize pattern recognition. Age discrimination training suggests varied reasoning for each case. They'd planned it, put it in writing. Maxwell actually documented his own age discrimination scheme, and Patricia helped him do it legally. I forwarded everything to Howard with 2 words, game over. He called back in 15 minutes. Garrett, this isn't a wrongful termination case anymore. This is a federal age discrimination lawsuit with punitive damages. If this goes public, it triggers EEOC investigation, class action potential, reputational nightmare. They'll pay serious money to make it disappear. Then let's give them that opportunity. Howard drafted the demand letter that same afternoon, 2 pages, legal letterhead, surgical precision, per Section 14C of Mr. Wells' employment contract. We demand payment of 8% of TechFlow Solutions' Q3 net quarterly profit due to his wrongful termination without cause. Attached documentation demonstrates systematic age discrimination, falsified performance records, and premeditated targeting of employees over 45. We are prepared to file suit with the EEOC and notify relevant media outlets unless this matter is resolved within 10 business days. The letter went out certified mail Thursday morning. I got the delivery confirmation Friday afternoon. Now we waited. Monday brought silence. Tuesday, nothing. Wednesday morning, my phone rang at 8:15 a.m. Jennifer Walsh, senior partner at Morrison, Walsh & Associates. Her voice had that practiced calm lawyers use when they're trying not to sound desperate. Mr. Wells, we represent TechFlow Solutions. We'd like to discuss resolution options. I'm listening. Face-to-face meeting would be preferable. You, your counsel, our legal team, and Mr. Morrison. Vincent Morrison, the CEO, they were bringing in the corner office. Today, 2 p.m., our offices, she said. Howard nodded when I looked at him. We'll be there. That afternoon felt like walking into enemy territory. Glass conference room on the 20th floor, leather chairs arranged like a tribunal, bottled water lined up like ammunition. The view overlooked downtown, all steel and glass and power. Maxwell sat on the far side of the table, wouldn't look directly at me. His swagger from 2 weeks ago was gone, replaced by nervous energy. He kept checking his phone, adjusting his tie, fidgeting like a kid called to the principal's office. His expensive haircut couldn't hide the fact that he was sweating. Next to him sat Vincent Morrison, 58 years old, silver hair, navy suit that probably cost more than my car payment. The kind of executive who could restructure entire divisions without changing expression. Jennifer Walsh sat at the head with her laptop open, flanked by two junior associates taking notes. Howard looked completely relaxed, like this was just another Wednesday. Yellow legal pad in front of him, Mont Blanc pen, briefcase that had seen 1,000 settlements. Gentlemen, Miss Walsh, thank you for taking the time to meet, Howard began. I believe there's been some serious confusion about my client's termination. No confusion, Jennifer said, her voice crisp. Mr. Wells was terminated as part of legitimate business restructuring necessitated by changing market conditions. Interesting perspective. Howard slid a flash drive across the polished table. May I? Jennifer looked at Morrison. He nodded once. She plugged the drive into her laptop. Howard stood up, clicked his wireless remote. The wall screen lit up with a Word document. Performance Improvement Plan for Garrett Wells, dated August 15, 2024. Click. The metadata panel filled half the screen. Date created, October 9th, 3:02 p.m. Mr. Wells was terminated October 6th. The room went dead quiet. You could hear the air conditioning cycling. Howard clicked again. Written warning for failure to embrace agile transformation, dated September 10th, 2024. Created October 9th, 3 to 28 p.m. Click Final Performance Review citing resistance to modernization, dated September 28th. Also created October 9th, 3:34 p.m. Maxwell's face had gone pale. Morrison's eyes shifted to Maxwell like a sniper's scope locking onto a target. All three documents, Howard continued, created in a 12-minute window, 3 days after termination. All backdated. All fabricated to convert a without-cause termination into a for-cause firing. Jennifer started to speak, but Howard raised his hand. Second exhibit. He pulled up a new file. Email chain between Mr. Stone and Ms. Reynolds, dated September 20th. The emails appeared on screen, Maxwell's words in 14-point font. Focus on high-salary developers 45 plus. Cost savings will improve departmental metrics. Morrison read silently, his jaw muscles working like he was chewing glass. Patricia Reynolds' response. Howard clicked again. Age discrimination training suggests varied reasoning for each case. Your own HR department acknowledging they're systematically targeting older workers while trying to disguise it. The silence was beautiful. Maxwell looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. Howard turned to face Morrison directly. So let me summarize the situation. My client completed a $28 million project that generated substantial Q3 revenue. Then he was terminated without cause as part of an age-based reduction in force. Then documents were fabricated to justify the termination retroactively. Then we discovered this was part of a pattern targeting multiple employees over 45. He paused. Let that sink in. We have sworn affidavits from 3 other terminated employees. We have server logs showing document creation times. We have more emails detailing the systematic nature of this discrimination. We have testimony from current employees about Mr. Stone's statements regarding digital natives and fresh energy. Morrison stared at the screen, then turned slowly toward Maxwell. Step outside. Sir, I can explain the context. Step outside. Now, Maxwell stood so fast his chair rolled backward into the window. He grabbed his phone, fumbled it, nearly dropped it, then practically jogged to the door. The sound of his dress shoes on marble echoed through the conference room. The silence that followed was profound. Morrison turned back to us, his expression unreadable. Ms. Walsh cleared the room. The junior associates gathered their laptops and files. Jennifer started packing up. Not you. Morrison said to Howard, you stay. Just 4 of us now. Me, Howard, Morrison, and the wreckage of Maxwell's career spread across a PowerPoint presentation. Morrison folded his hands on the table. Mr. Wells, let me be direct. You're not here to destroy the company. You're here to get paid what you're owed. I met his eyes. That's correct. And you, he looked at Howard, are here to make sure I understand that the alternative is a very public federal investigation. Howard smiled but didn't say a word. Sometimes the best negotiation tactic is letting the other side talk themselves into your position. Morrison reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder, already prepared, which told me they'd been planning for this conversation since they got our letter. Full contract compliance. 8% of actual Q3 net profit. Our final audit came in at $24.2 million. That works out to $1,936,000. He slid the folder across the table. Wire transfer within 48 hours of signature. Howard opened the folder, started reading the settlement agreement. His face stayed neutral, which in lawyer speak meant the numbers were real and the terms were clean. Standard NDA, I asked. You don't discuss the settlement amount or circumstances with media, competitors, or social media. You're free to discuss your experience in general terms. Morrison paused, and Mr. Stone's employment will be terminated immediately for violation of company policy. I tapped the folder with one finger. 3 conditions. Morrison waited, his expression unchanged. First, I said Melissa Crawford gets a consulting agreement. One had $80,000 for 1 year. She was fired for asking the right questions about revenue recognition. Morrison's eyes narrowed slightly, then he nodded. Agreed? Second, Orlando Hayes gets promoted to senior QA lead immediately. Title, salary bump, equity package. He's been doing senior level work for 2 years without recognition. Done. What's the third condition? I paused, thinking about Diana, about all the nights she'd stayed up helping me debug code when I brought work home, about her belief that experience and loyalty should mean something in a world that worships youth and disruption. I want you to implement a formal mentorship program. Pair experienced developers with new hires. Call it the Diana Wells Technical Mentorship Program. Fund it with $250,000 annually. Make sure knowledge transfer actually happens instead of just pushing out anyone over 40. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Your wife? She believed that wisdom shared was wisdom multiplied. The Diana Wells program it is. Paperwork finalized by end of business today. Morrison stood, extended his hand. I stood and shook it. His grip was firm, dry, the handshake of a man who'd just paid nearly $2 million to avoid a much bigger problem. One final thing, Morrison said as we reached the door. We'd like you to consider returning. Chief Technology Officer position. Significant equity. Full autonomy over technical decisions. I looked at him, at his corner office empire, at the view of a city full of companies that chewed up experienced workers and spat them out for quarterly numbers. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I'm done working for people who need federal lawsuits to teach them basic human decency. Howard and I walked out of TechFlow Solutions for the last time. Outside, the October air was crisp and clean. Traffic moved past like the city didn't know that a small war had just ended on the 20th floor. You could have negotiated for more, Howard said on the sidewalk. Age discrimination cases with this much documentation can hit $5 million easy. I got what was mine, plus some accountability. We shook hands. My phone buzzed before I reached the parking garage. Text from Orlando. Did I just get promoted? People are talking about Maxwell being escorted out by security. I typed back. You earned that promotion 2 years ago. Maxwell learned what happens when you mistake experience for liability. 48 hours later, the wire hit my account. $1,936,000. I stared at that number until my eyes watered. Then I logged into the hospital billing portal and typed in Diana's account number. Balance $0, $0, $0. Paid in full. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot and cried for the first time since the funeral. Not from grief, but from relief. The weight that had been crushing my chest for months was finally gone. The first call I made was to Melissa Crawford. She picked up on the second ring. Sounding tired in that particular way unemployed people sound after weeks of rejection emails. Melissa, it's Garrett Wells. Garrett, I heard through the grapevine that you were fighting them. How did it go? Check your email. Should have hit about 20 minutes ago. I heard mouse clicking, then silence, then her breath caught. This says $180,000 1-year consulting agreement. That's what it says. I don't understand. Why would you? You stood up when it mattered. You kept honest books when they told you to look the other way. 10 years of your life, Melissa. They owed you more than a cardboard box and 2 weeks' notice. Her voice was thick when she spoke again. Nobody's ever done anything like this for me. We take care of our own. That's how it's supposed to work. Orlando called that afternoon Senior QA Lead. Official title $35,000 raise equity package. Stock options. What did you threaten them with? Just reminded them what systematic age discrimination looks like when federal investigators start asking questions. Man. He laughed, and I could hear the relief in his voice. I've been doing senior work for 2 years, wondering if they'd ever notice. They noticed. They just didn't want to pay for it until they had to. 3 weeks later, Maxwell's departure was announced in a terse company email, pursuing new opportunities in the startup ecosystem. His LinkedIn went dark that same day. Word travels fast in tech circles. Within a month, I heard from 3 different recruiters that he'd been interviewing around town. Just wanted to check references, they said. None of them made offers. The thing about the tech industry is, it's smaller than people think. When word gets out that you systematically discriminated against experienced workers to pad your performance metrics, your career doesn't recover. Companies might tolerate incompetence, but they won't tolerate the kind of legal liability that follows someone like Maxwell around. I started the Diana Wells Technical Mentorship at TechFlow 2 months later with an additional $200,000 of my own money. The program pairs senior developers with junior hires, ensures knowledge transfer actually happens, and provides career guidance for engineers over 40 facing the industry's youth obsession. Diana always said that experience was just wisdom you paid for. Seemed right to make sure that wisdom got passed on instead of pushed out. 6 months after the settlement, I ran into Orlando at a tech conference in Austin. He was giving a presentation on quality assurance methodologies, talking to a room full of developers like he'd been doing it his whole career. "How's the new role treating you?" I asked over coffee afterward. "Good, really good. They actually listen to my recommendations now. Amazing what a title change can do for people's respect levels. That's what happens when the recognition matches the work you've been doing all along." Orlando stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "You know Maxwell applied for a senior position at Dataflow Systems last month? Yeah, they called me as a reference." I told them the truth about his leadership style and management decisions. He smiled. They withdrew their offer that afternoon. We sat quietly for a moment, 2 guys who'd survived corporate politics and lived to tell about it. "You ever regret how it all went down?" Orlando asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. About Maxwell's career in ruins. About the money in my account that had freed me from Diana's medical debt. About Melissa getting the recognition she deserved. About Orlando finally getting promoted. About young developers at TechFlow now having mentors instead of just being told to figure it out or get pushed aside. "No," I said, "I don't regret any of it." And I meant it. Some nights I still sit in my home office with a bourbon and think about how close I came to just walking away, taking the loss, accepting that sometimes good people get screwed and that's just how the corporate world works. But I didn't walk away. I read the fine print. I gathered the evidence. I brought in the right people and made them pay for every lie they told, every document they forged, every experienced worker they pushed aside for being too old to fit their startup culture fantasy. That's not revenge, that's accountability. Maxwell Stone thought my age was a disadvantage. He was wrong. Experience taught me to read contracts carefully. Experience gave me the patience to build airtight legal cases. Experience helped me recognize patterns and gather allies. Experience turned his weapon against me into his own destruction. I work as an independent consultant now, 3 days a week, helping companies build robust systems without the politics and ageism. The house is quieter than when Diana was here, but it's mine, paid off. No crushing debt, no medical bills eating away at my sleep. The Diana Wells Mentorship Program graduated its first cohort last month. 12 junior developers now have real technical skills and 12 senior engineers know their wisdom has value. Diana would have loved seeing experience and youth working together instead of being told they're enemies. I sleep better than I have in years, and every morning I wake up knowing that somewhere, Maxwell Stone is still explaining to potential employers why his last company terminated him immediately after a discrimination investigation. That's not revenge, that's just mathematics. You discriminate against people who know how to read contracts, and eventually the numbers catch up with you. They say age is just a number in tech, but experience is the compound interest of wisdom, and like all investments, it pays the biggest dividends when you know exactly when to cash out. In a world that worships disruption, sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply reading the fine print and remembering that contracts work both ways.